Hello and welcome to our webinar, which is powered by the Property Investors Awards. My name is Cyril Thomas, founder of the Property Investors Awards, full-time property investor and owner of a number of property and technology related businesses. Before we get going, I just want to make sure you can all hear me. So can you all put your hand up to show that you can actually hear what I'm saying? Lovely. Thank you, Toby. Thanks, Paul. Okay. Can I wait to see a few more hands go up? So you can put your hand up in the section in your GoToWebinar panel on the, should be on the right hand side. Lovely. Excellent. Okay, what I'll do is I can see enough of you with your hands up, so I'll just put all of your hands down now. And I can see a few questions coming in. That's a good point. So throughout this webinar, please don't hesitate to send through your questions and we will fit the questions in at the end. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, the Property Investors Awards has been growing for the last several years, and this year we'll see 550 plus property people gathering in central London to celebrate the successes of the year. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce the special guest for this evening, SSAS specialist and fundraising expert, Kevin Whelan of Wealth Builders. Kevin, please give us some information about your background and what qualifies you to speak on the subject of SSAS pensions.
Well, thanks very much for the invitation, Cyril. Delighted to be on here and also delighted to be participating in your awards program next year for the best use of SSAS in property. So I best describe what a SSAS is all about. But what gives me the right to speak to an audience as well versed in property as your audience, Cyril, is since 2008, when the credit crunch came, we saw immediately two problems. One, the stock market crashed and millions of pounds were eradicated from people's lives through no fault of their own. And also property people couldn't get money. So what I discovered in that journey to help my clients was to create a program or a solution that helped people take control of their money. So instead of having to leave their typical pension funds, let's say, in the stock market, then we found a way that through the use of a special vehicle, which I'll go on to describe, to allow people to take complete control of their own money. And that means they can use their own money to fund property. But at the same time, you know, we're now bringing in something like 10 million a month of new pension funds into SSASs. And that gives me another problem. And the problem is, how do we find people to deploy that money with? And the most popular asset by far, so as you would guess, would be property. And we're constantly looking for great property people to match the money that our clients have with great projects. So I'm hoping that for those on the call who perhaps want to understand SSAS for themselves, that's just great. But for those who are not interested in that concept for themselves, because maybe they don't have pensions, maybe they'll never want to, but please pay attention, because the vast sums of money that are locked up in these pension funds are available to good property people. So I think that's what gives me the credibility to speak. Would that be okay by you? Excellent.
Well, I surely do think you sound like you've got enough credentials there. So you're not, you're a man who's quite used to doing podcasts, webinars, etc. So I'm going to let you lead the way with this. Is that okay?
Yeah, no problem at all. I mean, the thing that's important, I mean, I'll just mention for a second, as you did a very able demonstration of your own organization. My business is called Wealth Builders. And the principle behind Wealth Builders is to create, build, and protect wealth of our members and our clients in a step-by-step process. But I won't go into that today. What I'd like to talk about is, oops, 1 second. Is talk about the concept that when you're going back to basics, and I'm a teacher fundamentally at heart, that it's people who finance property. So anybody who's interested in property, I suppose my experience has been over the last 10 years is everybody has in property has an ambition which is greater than their personal source of funds. So when you realize that ultimately it's people who finance property, whether it's money in a bank, whether it's money in bridging, wherever money is at that eventually gets used for property, it comes from people. And this is at the core of what Wealth Builders do and how we help property developers get access to more money by, first of all, understanding that by understanding people and building relationships with people, you become more investable. So you can see in this particular picture that the whole concept is people are building and growing roots together to take time to build that relationship. Whereas what I tend to see, and you may well resonate with this, Cyril, if you've been out there in network property land, is you normally see somebody speaking a million miles an hour about HMOs or Article 4 or their ROIs or whatever it would be, really important to them to find a deal or find an opportunity and need to match the money. They tend to speak quickly. They want money quickly. Yet the people who they're speaking to are receiving that information and it's too fast for them. They tend to get confused or they back away. And in real life, the gears don't grate. They just simply don't make that investment. And many property people I've spoken to, and I've seen it firsthand, they just don't like this process. It just seems to be fundamentally flawed, but it gets played out really all the time. So my background in this is, I suppose the key thing here is to understand that I've been a funder of joint venture property and have understood how private investors think. And we now look after £200 million, so some credibility there, and have raised tens of billions and funded hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of joint ventures. So I think there's some credibility also then in saying, we know how private investment and property developers work well together. And one of the things I'll talk about in a moment is just the journey that most people are on. But before we get there, whenever I'm dealing with developers, the key thing that I ask them for is, what's your funding strategy? And they kind of look at me blankly. I say, well, okay, are you looking for 10 HMOs? Are you looking for 20 deals this year? Or have you got a target of £50,000 a year in net income? What are you trying to achieve? And the concept behind this then is, if somebody, let's say, is in a HMO strategy, and they say, I want to buy 10 HMOs, that gives me £10,000 of net income. So my end in mind is my wealth. And each property would cost, say, in terms of deposit and refurb, 100,000. Then the funding strategy is, how do I get £1 million? But if they don't have £1 million, if they can find a private investor who's got £100,000, then that money can be used time and time and time again. And the easiest money to use, as we'll discover in a little while, is money that already people have got locked up. So I'm just suggesting that when people start, they should start with the concept of what's the funding they need, and then how many private funders, if they need private funding, do they need? And usually it's only a handful. And as I'll describe later, with groups and organizations, so if you've got a very solid group of people and they interact with each other, often, money can change hands with each other once you realize where money is at. And almost everybody's been, is experiencing this chicken and egg situation as, what comes first, Cyril? Is it the deal? Is it the money? And everybody has a different opinion on that. And my view is, it should be regarded just like we see here, in equal regard, that you should focus as much time on finding the deal as finding the money, then you balance out the flows. And most people start, on the same funding journey. They, first of all, like anybody, when they're looking to buy property, they look to themselves. So they look inwardly where they think they've got their money, which is usually a remortgage of their main home, or perhaps it could be cashing in some ISAs or a redundancy payment. You get the idea, where money's at. And then when they run out of that, they look kind of very close by to them, they friends and family, and that's not uncommon. And then when they get to that place, all of a sudden, they've now got to realize that they're looking externally. And one of the challenges when you look externally is, if you're dealing with bank funding, bridge funding, any other kind of funding, you're really looking for somebody else to offer you terms. When you're in a situation where you're looking for private funders, you've got to think about you offering other people terms. So you're making an opportunity available for third parties. And that's one of the most difficult things for property experts and developers to do, is to think like an investor instead of thinking like a developer. So it's turning that thinking and that empathy back to the picture I shared with you at the beginning of the roots underneath the relationship, and that's the key to all of that. But once they get to that place, what I find next is they get to this place where they either have to stand on stage or they have to ask strangers for money, which is not a great place to be. And laughingly, in our business, we call that the NFL, which is nothing to do with the National Football League. So it's more to do with having no funds left, no friends left, and really in a place where it's quite difficult to know what to do next because the ambition is still there, but there's just no funding. So I want to raise now why, I've sort of positioned that, and I want to now show why it's really important to think like the investor as opposed to thinking like the developer. So here's some figures. If you understand that people have got money in certain places, and we'll come on to the 5 sources of funding in a moment, and maybe people don't realize there are 5 different sources. But if you've got an investor with cash in the bank, I've just made up a figure here of 1%. I guess, even today, cash in the bank is getting less than 1%. In a pension fund, typically, the average stock market investment over the long term, when you iron out booms and bumps, and trust me on this because I am an economist and I study these things, is around about 6%. But by the time you paid custodian fees to the insurance company, fund manager fees, obviously for that, and then IFA fees or advisor fees, which on average in the UK are 2%, then you're netted down to 4%. And that's an interesting JV, isn't it? That somebody else is taking a third of your money with no money of their own in, no risk in the deal, and absolutely no accountability if something goes wrong. Bit bizarre, that one. And not a joint venture I sign up to. Hence, as we'll come on to, there's a pension solution that most people gravitate to when they see this. But your audience and people I meet and serve very well, if they're doing other strategies like, say, HMO or commercial to residential, those figures could be anything, but certainly they'd be in double digits. 10 to 15 would be not uncommon for HMO, and certainly in the 20s for our commercial to residential experts, and in some cases in the high 20s or even 30s. So there's an obvious question here is, why isn't there a queue of people beating down the door of people who are experts in property? And the key answer to that is really the education of letting people know that there is an alternative. And I'll come on to how to do that a little bit later as we get through this. So these are the 5 sources, Cyril, of where money's at. And you have to think about these very seriously and work out which is the easiest one to reach, which is the one source which is going to give you the best outcome, both for you and for them. And it isn't the home equity. You don't go up to people in a networking meeting and say, how do you fancy remortgaging your home for me? That's not going to happen. So most people start with cash. And personal cash is a challenge because personal cash is always in demand. There's always need for security. Husband and wife might need money for different reasons, or school fees, or all sorts of things. And business cash is interesting as well, actually, because there's much evidence now, and I work with business owners every single day of my life. There is so many business owners stockpiling cash because they don't know what to do with it. They want to take it out and pay dividend tax. So there's a rich vein of opportunity where we help business owners use the cash in their businesses to lend to property developers that we work with. And I do that myself. As soon as I've got an excess of £100,000, that money is straight out and loaned to other people to get a good return for me and let somebody else build another asset. But the big yellow door, the one that kind of turns people off and they hit snooze sometimes, but I'd say stay with me on this one, is the big yellow pension door, because when you go through the pension door and realize it's the biggest locked vault there ever has been, and the money is so easy to reach once you understand how. The current size of that pot in the UK is 2.5 trillion, and it's the biggest source where people are relying on their for their retirement. And what we do is we help our clients unlock that by taking control of that money. So instead of it being locked, they've got complete access to it in something called a Small Self Administered Scheme, or SSAS for short. Now, Cyril, this is not a sexy title, right? This is not what it says on the tin. Wealth builders, we help people build wealth. Property investor awards, you're doing awards, property awards. So it's easy. Small self-administered, but what the hell does that mean? Small means less than 12 people. Don't know why, it's just inland revenue stuff. So if there's less than 12 people in a scheme, So what does that mean? Families, siblings, business owners, small enough to be a group of people who can make decisions for themselves. Self-administered means self-directed, means you choose what you want to do with your own money. And scheme is another word for pension in law. So a small self-administered scheme is basically then the business owner writing to Legal and General or to Aviva or to Hargreaves Lansdown or whoever and says, you know what, I'm fed up of you putting a siphon in my money and me having just to invest in the stock market when I love property, or I could get to like investing my money with other property people for a return where I can see they're adding value, as opposed to the stock market where I'm just hoping that's the case. And this is what we're doing at £10 million a month at the minute. So there's a huge market for it. And what it gives to the individuals who get it is the freedom to do four things: to buy, to bridge, to borrow, and to bank. And I won't spend too much time on each of them because I'd like to show you how you can get access to this money. But let me give you some examples of people who are doing some things in the property world, starting with, say, very sophisticated things. So here's one of our clients, a guy called Mark Stokes, who may well be known to some of your audience tonight. Corporate background, very good developer, is now so into SaaS since he's been working with us. He's written a book about it and has created his own networking around it. So a hugely popular thing now, and he's facilitated so many things in property, and here's just an example. So this was an office he bought in Hull, which he used his SaaS. He combined it with him and his wife and his business partner and his wife, 4 different people then pooling their money. And in cash, they bought this commercial office with the permission to convert to residential. And so the SaaS paid for it when it was in the commercial shape. And then later on, after they got the permission for the apartments, they sold it out to their own SPV and created a GDV worth 2 million from a pension fund, which just had the money, they could buy it outright in cash. So there's some terrific things that can be done. Bridging, and there are simple things as well, buying straightforward commercial property, but that's just an example that I think is very powerful. Bridging in pension terms means lending to unconnected people on prudent commercial and secure terms. Now, all that means is smart people make decisions to lend to somebody else where both agree a return and they work out a level of security. Now, see it loud and clear, there is no D. The letter D does not appear unsecured. It does not have to be secured by legal charge. It could be a handshake. It could be, I've known this person for 20 years. It could be, they're giving me a great experience of learning. It could be a whole range of things. So as you're thinking maybe out there about, could I receive money? You do not have to give someone a first legal charge. So there's every scope to be able to find ways to build bridges between you and somebody else's money, hence the term bridge. Here's an example. This is my client, Chris, and his wife, Tracy, and they were not sophisticated in property. They were very, very simple, new to property, both coming from a corporate background, very cautious, working for a bank. They consolidated their pensions with our help into a SaaS, and they loaned money to a property developer who was experienced in HMOs. And essentially what happened is the loan was made from Chris to Chris in this case, and the Chris and Tracy got a 12% return plus a whole bunch of knowledge. So another ROI I mentioned there was return on intellect. So they got a return on their money, plus they got a very good return on their intellect. And Chris P got another HMO, which he gets 40% on his return. So in fact, he just called me today and said, I found another one. Would you like to lend me money? And I've got a spare couple of 100,000, so that'll be bringing its way to him in the next few days. Anyway, so the next thing Chris did, now notice he's not a property expert, no hard hat here, very bad boy, but nonetheless, he borrowed, so you can borrow up to 50% from your SaaS pension. So he borrowed 250 and he bought a 12-bed HMO with that, paying himself back, so he's both a lender and the borrower, 1.5%. So he was not 55, but he was getting an income in his early 50s from a pension that wasn't going to pay him to 60. So it's incredibly powerful. And I'm sure there'll be questions at the end, because the borrowing strategy is a very, very interesting one. And it's the most popular strategy we have for business owners who think, well, my business is my pension, or property is my pension. Yeah, but what if you had a pension that was tax-free, free of income tax, free of corporation tax, free of capital gains tax, and free of inheritance tax? What if you had some money in there too? You could build wealth in addition to property, but in a completely tax-free way. Anyway, that's Chris. And the other benefit for him is some of the surplus income that he's creating now, remember, way, way, way before his 60th birthday, was to help his daughter get a property of her own. And in his words, priceless. And that's what I mean by understanding people and try and get to the bottom of what people are really interested in. And then once you do that, you can make their money work together. And you can get a solution for you and a solution for them. So if you look back at Chris's story, before this happened, the money was just dormant. Now, four people have benefited. Chris and Tracy have benefited, say that's one. Chris P has benefited, and also his daughter has benefited, and all of them have benefited together, from a way they wouldn't have done before. Anyway, the bank strategy is an ATM. Essentially, when you reach 55, people like me, then you can simply tap away and get your money out of your pension scheme from age 55. 25% tax-free, 50% loan back. Essentially, then you're getting 75% of your money. So all you're really leaving in is the tax relief you got in the first place. So how's that for getting your money in, making it work, and getting your money out all tax-free? Anyway, I think that's a good move. So these are the benefits, if you are out there, whether you've got a pension or not, of using money or using other people's pension monies. Firstly, it never ever competes with cash, because people see their pension as a long-term thing. The knowledge you gain, if you will spend some time in learning it, you will not be a pensions expert after an hour. So, well, that's not going to be possible. But there's lots of information we can share for those who are interested on videos and in other information beyond it today, if that's interesting to anyone. The third is, as I said, as they're invested, they're already considering they're taking a risk. So if you can provide an asset backed like property, then it reduces that risk, and they perceive they're taking less risk than just being at the mercy of the market. Let's go back to 2008. And when people invest money from pensions, my experience is they repeat and they repeat. So if they're 40 and they lend to you, and then they're 41 and you give them their money back, they go, no, 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 no. I'd rather invest again. I don't want to put my money back on the stock market. So this repeat, repeat, repeat is a very, very valuable thing. And the final thing I'm going to say is, when you truly understand this, you don't need to use bridging and other expensive funding ever again, because by providing extra ROIs that I'll just cover, you can reduce the cost of borrowing and absolutely eliminate the need for cash flow to pay for interest, because what you can do is, by combining the ROIs, so you show people the return. We'll come back to the return on. So let's go from 3 o'clock round the clock clockwise. The most fundamental thing we encourage our developer partners to do is to demonstrate how they're protecting themselves, and then show their investors that means you're protecting them. Then you're showing them knowledge, you're teaching them, even if it's just walking them through, letting them see, letting them come along and kick the skirting board or whatever, so they get the idea that their money is coming to life in their brain. You're making them a smarter investor. You're not keeping them in the dark like the industry of financial services. The return on interaction is about a brand relationship. One of the things I've noticed with Mark Stokes and his brand is our investors seem to be just investing, not just repeating, but investing in multiple projects. So they invest in, a project we just did for him in Gatwick, but they're investing in another project. So they'll continue to invest where they feel like somebody cares about them, and that's what I mean by return on interaction. And what that means then is you drive down the cost to you, because if a bridge funder wants, 1.25% per annum, a private investor doesn't. If you give them a great return a return on their intellect, a return on that interaction and that brand relationship, they will often lend money at a fraction of that, usually around 8% or 9%, or something like that, because they're getting so much more that they value that a commercial lender just simply does not value at all. Does that make sense, Cyril? Am I making sense there?
Making perfect sense so far. That's why I'm not interrupting.
Okay, good. Just making sure that you agree, because you're a property guy too. So I just want to make check in that it's resonating with you on behalf of your.
I'm absorbing the knowledge.
Good man. So be sponge-like still further, and let's talk about wealth dynamics. This is something that most people have heard about, but the reason why wealth dynamics is really critical in raising money in property is because when you recognize that everybody out there who could be an investor could be any combination of the 4 wealth dynamics, those people who are in dynamo, who are very creative, very gut instinct, those people who are very people oriented in blaze, which is the red, those people who like timing, opportunity, experiences in yellow, and those people who just love the spreadsheets and the data, in gray. What I've found over the years, Cyril, is most developers create their story around themselves. So the creators just tend to tell you their big picture. The blaze developers tend just to talk, and they don't really therefore reach every single investor in a document. And I want to now talk about the first part of a 3-part process that we encourage all developers to think about. And it's very simple. You have a relationship with someone and you build the relationship in 3 steps. Step 1, before you get to really know them as you're building that relationship at the beginning. Step 2 is then what's the offer, what specifically is the opportunity you're bringing to their attention after you've got to know them. And then 3, how you maintain that relationship while the money's invested with you to encourage them to reinvest on the next turn of the wheel. And most people try and do that in one go. They'll say, here's my investment memorandum, or here's my opportunity. I'll give you 12% return on your investment, but I need the money next Tuesday. They won't spend the time building a relationship. So we created a process to engender trust, which is both compliant and compelling. What I mean by that is you will not get into compliance hot water. When I see people on Facebook and in various things posting rates of return and calling it an investment and guarantees, wow, they're walking straight into a bit of potential hot water. If the FCA see anything that says investment or says rates before you've spoken to a person, if you're not sure about this, Google FCA 13.3. That's something that's been spoken about in the property community a lot. FCA 13.3. You'll realize you get yourself into big hot water. And because we've been dealing with investors for a decade, we cover this off every single time by understanding how to stay clear of that. And how you do it is, I'm just going to talk today about document number 1, and we call it the 10 pillars of trust. So how do you create a document that is so compelling, but at the same time covers all the wealth dynamics, and at the same time tells people about you without you having to make them an offer? So they take time. Now, the problem with this, as I go through it, is most developers don't take the time. They don't think about creating the document because, as I said earlier, they're not thinking about how to present to people in a slow way. They tend to do it in a quick way. So let me explain how to do it. I'll give you them in kind of pieces. The first 3, logo, mission, story, are really just about creating something that says, I'm a business. I'm professional. I'm not an amateur. I'm thinking about this as if it was a brand to build that return on interaction. And that's what I mean by logo, mission, story. So who are you? Like my business, you saw my logo, you see it at the bottom there. It's a foundation, 7 pillars and a roof. Now, I won't be talking about that today, but our clients understand that because we build their wealth on a solid foundation. We explain to them the 7 ways to build wealth, and then we make it watertight by wills, trusts, and powers of attorney. And the mantra, the mission, is we create, build, and protect your wealth. And then the story is really all about the step-by-step process that you can take to do that. So how do you do that in your business? How do you as a developer do that? And think that one through. And by the way, I hope you're making notes, but if you are, don't worry, because at the end of this, Cyril, with your permission, I'll make available a set of 12 different templates and colorways that people can see and imagine to try and spend some of their own time and short circuit the time it will take them to get to this if they choose to do it.
I'm sure that'll be appreciated by our audience. And on that note, I should also say that this webinar is being recorded, so everybody who's on the webinar will have the chance to download it afterwards.
Cool. So the next thing is team. Now going back to dynamics, there are 4 different types of team member. And so being on your own can be a bit of a challenge. So having other people around you, even if it's a good builder or a good accountant or a good architect, whatever, build that story around you. And if you've got a team, understand your own wealth dynamic, because somewhere somebody's got to take responsibility for fundraising in a business that's seriously trying to grow. And the different wealth dynamics will tell you who should take care of that. And I'll give you an example, Cyril, which is a stark lesson. We were working with one husband and wife team, and they both decided to take responsibility for dealing with private investors. Now, they were good at what they did, but what we didn't realize until we got into it is when investors went to see them or talk to them, when they spoke to the wife, the terms were different from when they spoke to the husband. In other words, the husband was a bit more of a driver in terms of steel, and he was trying to drive the cost down, whereas the wife was more blazy, and she was trying to make sure she built the relationships. And it just didn't work together because different people got different rates of return. So there needs to be consistency. So you have to choose your offer and stick to it, and choose the right person who's great at dealing with people at the very beginning of their journey, because it's all about relationships. It's less about the numbers. Next thing is track record. Most people have got a track record, but they don't always document that. Copious photographs, that helps all the people with a creative energy. Whatever you've done, just document it. Even if you borrow from your previous career, if you're a city broker, say you had an incredible record in the city, you knew how to do due diligence on projects because that was what you did to protect your business, and you made millions for them, or whatever it is you did, or whatever it is you've done in the past, bring that story to the table as well. Absolutely, testimonials. And for those people who had private investors, get those testimonials, ideally with a photograph, better still on video, so that you can show people, those who are blaze energy people who want to know, well, what have other people done here? Because they'll feel nervous, but if you let them see that good people have invested with you and they've been happy. If you don't have any testimonials, get testimonials from your architect, or testimonials from people who you've worked with who say, they vouched for you, or they trusted you, or they've worked with you, so you can build your testimonials over time. Now, what does touch points mean, I wonder? Well, this really goes to the tempo energy people who like experiences. So if I'm meeting you for the first time and you're a developer, how many different ways do I get to touch a relationship with you? Do I come on a discovery day? Are you going to show me around? Are you just going to meet me for a coffee? Are you just going to send me a spreadsheet? What are you going to do? What different experiences can I get? Will you send me a video walkthrough after the event? What will you do? And so many of those people who work with us, we work together and we share great experience of the touch points that work. Our groups work really well because it creates, that almost the testimonials are there because good people are coming along on a discovery day. Some of our clients will use a discovery day, actually like Mark does, for example, where we had 30 people in a building in Colchester, all wearing hard hats, high-vis jackets, the whole 9 yards. And that made people feel like they're almost kind of part of the development process, and that binds them much more closely to the whole process. That builds that return on interaction that I mentioned earlier on. Contribution is more about, is there a bigger story? Remember I said at the beginning, begin with the end in mind. So when you create your wealth plan and you get to wherever you want to get to, whether it's 10 grand a month, 20 grand a month, whatever it is, what are you giving back? Is that a message for you? Is there a strong feeling of eco-friendliness? Are you looking for green? Are you looking to give back to society? Are you looking to give to the homeless? Are you looking to support a particular needy group of people? What is it that makes you outstanding in what you do? And that's what I mean by contribution. Now, the compliance piece is making a very simple offer that says something like this. Here are ABC Property Enterprises. We work with you in many different ways. We're willing to work with you to lend. We're willing to work with you, joint ventures, we're willing to work with you in different ways after we get to know you. And you have no interest rate, you have no explicit offer in this first document. And that's really, really critical, that you never put an offer at the beginning of your relationship, otherwise you'd be failing compliance and putting yourself in danger. And then finally, I don't mean contact, who to contact, but the consistency of that contact. You know, I was talking to someone who reached out to me the other day, and he told me about his business, but his LinkedIn profile said a different name, and his Facebook profile said something different. You know, what's the consistency of that? And does your business look congruent from beginning to end? You know, does it look professional from the start to finish? So I hope that gives a feeling for, you know, the work that we've done, and those people who follow this, and those who work with us. We have developer partners, and as I say, we have access to very large sums of money, and we treat our investors, those people with the money, we treat them to these principles so they understand them, so they're looking for them. So if you're looking to work with us or not, doesn't really matter at this point, but I'm sure that the lessons that are embedded here are lessons you could take yourself and use to help you get access to more money, including, of course, using your own money if you decide that you've got some lost or frozen pension somewhere that you want to bring to life, to do a joint venture with yourself, and then take that lesson and reach out to other SaaS people in the future. So here's just some few
Kevin,
examples.
Sorry to interrupt. Just to let you know, I think we can go into some depth here, but it's already not 7:37, which means we've only got 20 minutes left. So it's just a reminder that we should have at least 15 minutes of questions. So we've got a few questions from the audience.
That's great. We're just going to whiz through. These are just examples, so you can just see that, you know, we try and help people create colorways, cover off all the different points. This particular one has just been used by one of my clients to do an outstanding presentation, and with his permission, you know, I'd be able to send it to your audience as well. You get it. It's nothing more than just showing a professionalism rather than sending a spreadsheet or just telling people what you do. And this is a real one from a group called the Vincent Group, who we helped create their own documents. So in essence, then, before, you know, we get to the end, the reason that I mentioned the deal flow and the fund flow, if you manage it well, it really means money never runs out. You get almost to a place of money just keeps flowing, and that means infinity. And that's the essence of how we kind of like to see it work. So everybody's just working together, money's flowing between each other. It's not leaking out to the financial services industry. It's all working very well. So in summary then, you know, what we're trying to do is share value, because we know the property developers are working hard. We know the pensions are working hard. We're trying to make returns and profits for everyone, shared learning, do it in a safe environment. Good due diligence is kind of how we do that. And just as importantly, everybody's having real good fun doing it. And that's me done. So, you know, I'll let you know what it is that we're willing to give to your audience for, you know, being patient with me and listening to me warble on about various things. But I'll send you the templates, or I'll send everyone the templates. We'll send them some videos about SaaS and how that works in case they're interested, and lots of other wealth building resources, including, that's a picture of my book, which describes the 7 ways to build wealth. So all your audience need to do, Cyril, is just send me an email to hello@wealthbuilders.co.uk. So hello@wealthbuilders.co.uk, and mention this particular event, mention you, and we'll be happy to send it to them. Okay. And I know you're recording it, so we're more than happy to send it to other people beyond the scope of today. So that's me done, Cyril. If there's, happy to field any questions and turn it over to you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Kevin. I found that very informative, and I'm sure our audience did too. We do have a number of questions, so I'll just get straight into them. Anil says, I am a full-time landlord and don't operate through a company. What kind of company structure needs to be set up as a minimum to start a SaaS, please?
A limited company structure is needed for a SaaS, but if Anil is doing property, obviously there's a point at which property in your own name can be disadvantageous compared to creating a limited company anyway. More and more property people are converting to a corporate structure, and it's not difficult to set up a limited company, right? You know, you can do it in 15 minutes. and within a few months, any money that's been languishing in those frozen and forgotten pensions can be in your control and be used for property. So it's probably 60, 90 days tops away from being able to, from a standing start, to get access to your own money if you've got money of your own, Anil. So great question.
Excellent. So Anil, I hope that answered your question. Jerry is less than 30 years old, and he is considering getting into SSAS borrowing, but doesn't have a pension. So
Well,
are there any benefits for him getting involved, and how would he go about that?
Well, as I said earlier on, whether someone has a SSAS or not is irrelevant, but can you make yourself attractive or investable, as I said earlier, to SSAS investors? Well, age is not necessarily the key thing. It's creating the right documentation, the right uniqueness of offering. Somebody young, it's more difficult, no doubt about that, because the track record often isn't there. But I don't know this gentleman, so if he's outstanding at what he does, and that's what I look for. So people to work with me, the first thing I ask for them is, what are you doing that's outstanding? I don't mean average, I don't mean mediocre, I mean outstanding. I can see what you do, having the best awards, property awards in the whole of the country, 550 people. Cyril, you do outstanding work. I know wealth builders, we do outstanding work. If this gentleman, I didn't catch his name, under the age of 30 does outstanding work, you'll attract money. If he's just learning, then come back on a later date. Remember, you can always build relationships. One of the things I ask people, especially when they start off on their journeys, to be willing to say, hi, Kevin, I may not be ready yet, but I'd love to get your free resources and help me get ready so that when I am ready, I'm hitting the ground running, not starting from scratch. So I'm quite happy to take months, years to help people get to where they want to get to, because remember what I said earlier on, Cyril, we're getting millions a month. I need good people out there. Help me, guys, come on.
You've got the money, you just need the people.
I need the people who are outstanding. That's my language, and I make no apology for using it. So that's, and in order to be outstanding, you have to stand up for something. Is it the contribution? Is it the eco? Is it you've got a great story? Do you get great returns? What is it you do that's different from what somebody else does? That's what I'm looking for, because that's who we are.
Excellent. Thank you, Kevin. So Jay, Anil and Jerry says thank you. And Jay has a question. She says, can she use her military pension?
Yeah, I mean, well, the answer is no, unfortunately. There are some pensions which simply cannot be harnessed. And I'm afraid that's public sector pensions, military pensions, police force pensions, civil service pensions. And the reality is the government don't have the money. So, they can't give you the money because there's none there. In the end, your pension will come to you, but it will be paid by the taxpayers in the future when you reach that retirement age. So sadly not. But remember, there's more pension money out there than yours. So make yourself irresistible to others. Take some of the lessons I've shared with you about how to create a great property business that's attractive to third parties. And you can get other people's money, whether you've got your own money from your own pension or not.
Very interesting. I hope that helps, Jay. So Rabinda says, are you suitable for me if I am a small developer? As you said, the biggest problem is funds. Does that make sense to you?
Not really, because suitability doesn't mean anything. I'm a small developer, it doesn't tell me anything. So whether we're suitable or not means just building a relationship. So I would say, if you're a small developer, you're good at what you do, you could learn to be outstanding, or you're already outstanding, then reach out to me at hello@wealthbuilders.co.uk. Start a relationship, or send me a connection on LinkedIn, so I can get to know you. I can more than happy to critique your own marketing if you've got some marketing, and say, hey, I see this or I see that, because I just want good people out there to make themselves attractive, even if it might be too early for us. Not always, so I'm always on a journey of discovery, and every day I find somebody who I didn't know the day before that's definitely worth building a relationship with. So somebody on this call this evening is going to have a great relationship with me, so don't hesitate, just reach out and say hello.
Excellent. So we have this is some praise for you. Great presentation again, Kevin. Thank you. That's by Nigel Brumpton.
Oh yes, Nigel, hi. Okay.
So it seems that you have a few people who know you on here, Kevin.
Well, that's lovely. I mean, I suppose what I'm impressed by that is they're investing in their education, right? So if they're spending time, they're seeking information, doesn't matter if they hear it from me, maybe they've heard me say some things, not heard everything. And sometimes even if they've heard it 2 or 3 times, they pick something new, but either way, the message is always the same. Do good work, build relationships, the money always follows.
Okay, Kevin, that's very interesting, and thanks for that. So, what I'm thinking is that there'll be a number of people on this webinar who are not very experienced with SSAS pensions, and they may want to team up with other people. So, what's the process for doing that, and do you provide the mechanisms for doing so?
Could you expand on the question? I'm not sure I know what you mean, but so just help me a little more, and then I'm sure I can answer it for you.
You touched on earlier that you connect people who want money and people who have deals, etc., and people who are already involved in using their SSAS pensions in a way which is providing value for a number of people involved. What about the people who haven't got much experience, have got the pension funds, but just want to be teamed up or grouped together with people who have got more experience so that they can work with those individuals to increase their SSAS pensions? How do they go about that? Where do they start their journey?
Well, I mean, the start is always going to be the same thing, because everybody's position where they are now is going to be different. Everybody on the call is going to be uniquely them. What they've got from their pension might be some, nothing, or a lot. Their experience might be some, nothing, or a lot. What they're looking to do, their strategy will be very different. I'd say at this stage, the only thing to do is reach out. Do not hesitate. Don't hold back. Just reach out, and then you can tell me who you are, what you do, what you're looking for. And I give a promise to everybody who I spend any time with is to do my damnedest to be of value to you. Whether there's any commercial interest in it for me doesn't matter, because I'm paying it forward. I want people to respect that I do my best to help people. So I don't know the answer specifically, except I'll give it my best go if people take the time to reach out.
Excellent. Well, that does answer the question. So I think all that's left to say is a special thank you to our special guest, Kevin Whelan, for donating his time to help enlighten and empower us property investors this evening. Kevin, you've obviously got your information up on the screen, and you said that you are willing to take phone calls and emails from our guests. So you have a number of people saying thank you here in the questions area. Catherine Whitehouse is very thankful for your presentation this evening. From my understanding, you're also a judge at the Property Investors Awards, so you should be joining us this year at the ceremony.
I'm so looking forward to it, and I think you created a special award for me all on your own, Cyril, which is the best use of SSAS in property. So,
well,
maybe
you revealed a top secret there, because yes, we are going to be launching. It's out there now. We can't take it back. So we will be launching an award for the SSAS developments. So that watch this space. More information will be released soon. But you've heard it here first from Kevin Whelan. Okay, for more information about the property investment.
Yeah, but you see, if they've heard it first, then if they either thinking about doing a SSAS, get one and use it well, get yourself nominated. If you're looking to receive money from SSASs and you're great at what you do, you can get nominated. If nothing else, just make a lot of money. By the way, don't call me. That is my number, but you'll never get through to me. The best thing to do is send me an email, hello@wealthbuilders.co.uk. I'm never in my office, never am. So if you just send me an email, you're welcome to check out the website, but you'll get your free resources. My team will send it to you. It won't be me who'll send it to you. But if we'll send you a little note to say, what are you interested in? How can Kevin help you? And then we'll get back to you if there's a call needed. Once we get a little more about what you are, we'll check you out on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and websites and so forth. There's going to be some good people out there, and I'm looking forward to finding them.
That's efficient communication. Well, I'm going to say thank you again, Kevin. Anna's also said thank you. She said, I met you at Mark's SSAS's intro day. Lovely to listen to you today as well. So that's another person very thankful for what you're saying. Okay, Kevin, we are going to have to bring it to a close now. So any final words before we depart?
Now concentrate on building relationships. Do not think about yourself ahead of other people. Wealth flows to value, so concentrate on creating value for others, and the money will keep coming. I promise you that.
Wise words. Thank you very much, Kevin. To our audience, it's been a pleasure. And for more information about the Property Investors Awards, you can visit propertyinvestorsawards.co.uk. Good luck with your investments.